The Ada County Courthouse in Boise, Idaho, and this is where Bryan Kohberger, in spectacular fashion, just entered pleas of guilty to the murders of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. I was sitting right there with a bird's eye view of Bryan Kohberger as he entered those guilty pleas. He sat stoically looking straight at Prosecutor Bill Thompson as he read the statement of facts in this case, and I think we can unpack a little bit of why possibly now the prosecution agreed to this plea deal. I'm taking some kind of nuggets from what he read and piecing together why possibly he agreed to this. I want to let you know that we were set up over here possibly for a press conference. That non-dissemination order, the gag order in this case, remains in place. That means the state and the defense, the attorneys on both sides, and the law enforcement officers involved in this case cannot distribute any information. They can't make any public statements until after sentencing. The families, however, are not covered by that order. So they may be coming out and may choose to make a statement. They may not. As you know, they've been very particular about who they speak to. Some of them have documentary deals right now and aren't really making a lot of statements. However, if we do see them come out and possibly decide to say something, we will break down and get over there. I want to bring our guests in very quickly, though, to talk about this and unpack this a little bit. Mark Weaver is a special prosecutor in Ohio, and he has prosecuted death penalty cases. Also, Colin Schmidt is a retired FBI agent. I'll start with you, Mark. Your thoughts on what we heard today and Bryan Kohberger approaching the defense or approaching the state and saying, I want to plead guilty, please take the death penalty off the table, and the state agreeing to it.
Yeah, you and I on the air, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, I predicted this is likely to happen. We heard more of the evidence today. It's a circumstantial case, but a very strong circumstantial case. He could see this was coming. The victims now know a little bit more about what happened. It would have been better if he had said it from his own mouth. Perhaps he'll say that at sentencing. They need that closure. But there were people on the internet who said he didn't do it. Well, most of us knew he did, and now we know for sure he did.
What I thought was interesting were some of the things that Bill Thompson said, and I'll let you go right after we talk about this. But he said we had evidence that his phone was connecting to that tower that covered the King Road neighborhood and the residents, but we didn't have evidence connecting him directly to the 1122 King Road house and the victims inside. And I hear things like that, and it makes me think, if they were wondering on the prosecution side, could this potentially create a little bit of doubt in the minds of some jurors, even though we have the DNA on the knife sheath, even though that is really good circumstantial evidence, we still don't have that connection to the people inside the King Road house and the house specifically. We just have him in the general vicinity, and it's a densely populated area. Could that be one of the reasons why they agreed to this?
Yeah, that's a fair theory. Prosecutors would like to get a conviction and get closure. One juror during the guilt phase is enough to hang the trial and send it back to square one. And one juror at the penalty phase is enough to guarantee that it's going to be life in prison. And one juror might be that person hung up on, well, you didn't connect every dot all the way back to him. And so prosecutors would prefer to get some closure. I think that's why. We now know that perhaps they were worried that one or two jurors, not a full jury, would think that that's reasonable doubt, but one or two would be enough to hang the case.
Or it might be enough to get a conviction and get the same result, possibly life without parole and not a death sentence. So you might go through the pain of a trial and the expense of a trial and get the same result, and maybe that was part of the calculus here. We'll find out hopefully soon. Mark Weaver, I know you have to hop off of here. Thank you so much for joining me. We are taking your questions, so please drop them in our YouTube chat, and Colin and I will get to as many of them as we can. So Colin, I want to get your thoughts on what we heard today. Bryan Kohberger, after all of this time asserting his innocence, suddenly changing his plea. This could have been going on in the background for a long time. He could have been discussing this with his lawyers for a long time. They could have said to him, Bryan, we're going to try this. We're going to try that. We're going to ask them to strike the death penalty. The cards are stacked against you, but this is what we're going to do. This is the next motion we're filing. And when everything failed, when all of their motions were denied, maybe he just came to the realization, and they had this meeting with him, and they said, you know what, we're at the end of the road, and this is it.
Well, I think they had their own calculus in terms of how much they could put reasonable doubt in front of a jury. Your other guess was spot on. It can be a tall case or a big case to prove when you have all circumstantial evidence, and then for them to have to put on cell phone for forensics, it can be completely very, very complicated for a jury to understand, and to be able to have to link those dots as far as a cell phone to the house. So I think this was the best of the worst decisions to make, because they would have also had to put the families through a trial, a very long trial. But I know there are some families that are frustrated because they did want him to get the death penalty.
And the death penalty, getting it is not a given. It really isn't. You can seek it. It doesn't mean that you're going to get it if there is a conviction. We've seen plenty of cases where the death penalty was sought by prosecutors, and it seemed like it might be a given, or this is a death penalty case, and then the jurors went the other way, and it only takes one juror to say, I can't vote for death, and then you get life without parole. Let's talk a little bit more about that cell phone evidence that you just discussed. There were 23 times that the FBI cast agent, the cast analysis, the agent Nick Balance was going to testify 23 occasions between July and a week before the murders, that they say that Bryan Kohberger's phone was connecting to the cell tower that covered King Road. However, there were a lot of houses there, and I've been there. There are a lot of houses there. It's on Greek Row. So they might have not have been able to show that he was, quote unquote, casing or stalking or surveilling the house. And as you just mentioned, it can get very complicated and complex. And on the defense side, they had their own expert. They had their own cell phone expert who typically testifies for prosecutors, Cy Ray. He testifies all over the country for prosecutors. So that could have been something that turned out to be very contentious at trial had this gone forward.
Yeah, it would have been, frankly, a nightmare for the FBI witness, because he would have been on the stand for a very, very, very long time. And so every little thing he would say or testify to, the defense is going to pick apart and turn around, and then they have a expert waiting there to dispute every little finding he may have had. However, 22 instances of him of Kohberger being there, that's overwhelming circumstantial evidence. But the challenge is, was the FBI special agent going to be able to introduce and make sure that the jury understood how he found that information and how it was connected to the target?
And that's the question. I mean, because that information can be very complicated and complex. What was your take and your reaction to the way Bryan Kohberger, during that first question from the judge, just stood up and said yes? What was your reaction to that?
Well, I think this is somebody with deep mental health issues, not that was a defense, and somebody who's likely a psychopath. And I mean, I'm not a mental health expert or a psychologist or psychiatrist, but somebody that it appears that he just doesn't have remorse, and he's more of a robot. And frankly, I think this was a transactional decision for him, that it was either the death penalty or risking the death penalty or life in prison. So my heart goes out to the victims. This was a senseless, horrible crime, and they got the right guy.
And after all of this time, it's interesting you say that they got the right guy, Colin. After all of this time, he's finally admitted it. It appeared they had just a mountain of evidence against him. They had the K-bar knife and sheath purchase that he made on Amazon in March of 2022 before he moved to Idaho. He moves to Idaho in late June to pursue his PhD. And then in July, he starts kind of, it sounds like, hanging out in that general vicinity around Greek Row, where the King Road home was located. So it sounds like they think he had a plan. They did point out, though, that they don't know if he went in there intending to kill all 4 victims. And that's kind of been something that I've thought in covering this case, that possibly he went in there to target one person and that things spiraled out of control. So I found it interesting that the prosecutor brought that up, that they don't know if all 4 victims were part of his so-called plan. But they also said that he kind of studied this and he knew how to keep from contaminating a crime scene as well. What were your thoughts on those 2 items?
Well, the first point that I'd like to make is just the level of violence that he did to in this crime scene is indicative of not only planning, but did he have a period or several events that led to this? And frankly, is there other victims out there? Are there other people he may have done this to? And so that'll definitely be part of the post investigation, is if he will cooperate to see if he is truly a serial killer and there's something in some other victims out there that they're not aware of. And then the fact that, like you said, he was operating in a method that he was trying to hide his tracks and trying to to throw off the scent, so to speak. But per usual, the phones always get you, and he had the phone with him, and I think that's really was the what broke the case. And then, of course, obviously the DNA that was on the sheath of the K-bar knife.
Case wide open. If they hadn't had that, Colin, they wouldn't have been able to identify a perpetrator in this case, or else it may have taken a lot longer. But that was really the direct link to Bryan Kohberger. That's how they identified him as the suspect in this case. I mean, there was no other forensic evidence linking him to the case. They said they went into his apartment, they went into his office. They said Spartan would be kind of a kind description of both of those locations. There was nothing of evidentiary value there. And when they seized his car, they took it apart and they said it had been meticulously cleaned. His attorneys tried to say that that was because of his obsessive compulsive disorder, but law enforcement saying no, he cleaned that to ensure that there wasn't one speck of evidence behind. So there have been some interesting issues raised in this case. For sure. So we're going to have a sentencing hearing on July 23rd. It will likely last all day. The prosecutor in this case, Bill Thompson, said that he wants to ensure that all of the victims can speak, and there are people with varying perspectives in this case. Oh, pardon me. Excuse me. I had a little sneeze there. I apologize. I want to get to your questions now. Let's start taking some of your questions. But that sentencing will take place on July 23rd. The victims will be allowed to speak. Bryan Kohberger will be allowed to address the court if he so chooses, and his family will be allowed to speak. I want to say that his mother, Marianne, and his father, Michael, were both in court, and his father often put his arm around his mother to console her, because this, had to be incredibly difficult for them to hear and to listen to. Their son, their only son, their youngest child, sitting there and admitting to a heinous crime. Nobody raises their children to do something like this. So they were very quiet and very solemn throughout this proceeding. But let's get to some questions, Colin, if you will. This one comes from Detective Mad Chen. Is BK in solitary? Will he move to Gen Pop? And will he move to prisons? I know right now he's being kept separated from other inmates at the Ada County Jail, but what happens, do you think, Colin, when he is eventually moved to an Idaho State prison? Do you think he'll stay in general population, or will he be moved to a prison?
Well, the prison system in Idaho has a responsibility to keep all the prisoners safe, and somebody like him that is so infamous, I think they'd be very careful about putting him in the general population because of what happened to Jeffrey Dahmer. As soon as he went in, or shortly after he went in general population, he was killed by another inmate who wanted some notoriety for killing Jeffrey Dahmer. So I think it's unlikely that he'll go into general population for some time because, frankly, the prison system doesn't want to be responsible or show that they did do everything they could to keep him safe.
There's something else that they often do, Colin. I'm sure you're familiar with this. I've seen it in other high-profile cases, especially really gruesome murders, where people may be a target, where offenders may be targets, or be targeted by other inmates because of just the horrific nature of a crime and because of the high-profile nature of it. A lot of times, the State Department of Corrections will determine that this person's just a risk and we can't keep them safe here. So sometimes they'll move them to a prison out of state just to kind of move them out, to get them away from people who may want to take some type of vigilante justice. So that happens as well.
Yeah, but I doubt that's going to happen in this case, because he has worldwide notoriety. It doesn't matter where they move him; he's going to be known. And I think Idaho is going to do everything they can to take responsibility for his care, for most likely for the rest of his life. And he's a young man, so they're going to have to deal with him for 40, 50, 60 years in some way. And the Department of Corrections there, I'm sure, has already had a plan. They already know where they're going to put him and how they're going to keep him safe. And definitely they're not going to do anything that would bring any notoriety to the Department of Corrections for not doing everything or not mitigating the risk of having him in custody.
Our next, I want to say we have a poll up now too. We have a poll up. Why do you think Kohberger took a plea? So vote in our poll, and we'll update you on the results very shortly now. Our next question is from Chris Buono. Do you think Kohberger is delighting about being the known killer now? What are your thoughts on that, Colin? Do you think he's enjoying the notoriety? He doesn't come into court and look at the cameras or smile at the cameras. We don't see that from him, like we had maybe with a Ted Bundy, who really seemed to delight and enjoy the limelight. But do you think this is somebody, he seems more introverted, more quiet and reserved. Do you believe he's somebody who maybe is enjoying this level of notoriety and being, on television, on social media, that type of thing?
Well, obviously we're all speculating on that as well, because we don't know. We can't take a step into his mind, or I don't know what the conversations law enforcement has had with him. Other serial killers they killed for notoriety, and when I say serial killer or somebody who's killed multiple people. So I think this is going to take on a life of its own once he gets into prison. He's going to get interviewed by some media, and then only time will tell how he interacts with the media interacting with him, whether he's starting to enjoy it. But right now, I really can't tell whether he's enjoying it or not. I think he's probably still, there's some sense of relief that it's over for him as far as the trial, and he knows what his consequence is going to be. But I think it will lead to many podcasts, many documentaries, and many opportunities for the media to come to him and try to interview him to get his state of mind.
And that's probably already happened. I've mentioned that there are already documentaries that have been made about this case. One is premiering on Amazon Prime next week, I believe, or within the next week. There's one in the works, I believe, with Netflix. There's one I'm in that's going to be on Peacock very soon. So that we think that might be dropping this week now. It was supposed to drop later on. So there are a lot of people who are still going to be making documentaries and films. There are a lot of them that will come out still after this wave. So I'm sure that a lot of people have reached out to him, his lawyers, and his family already to try to write books, documentaries, you name it. Let's talk now about a question from Teresa Phillips. And Colin, I know you're not an attorney, but you were an FBI agent and you've dealt with plenty of prosecutors and defense attorneys in your time. And I can kind of answer this too, but how was it okay ethically for Ann Taylor to accuse 4 innocent people of the murder when she knew that BK was guilty? And this goes to the alternate suspect information that she submitted to the court. She submitted 4 alternate suspects to the court that she wanted to be allowed to present at trial. So, Colin, your thoughts on that?
Well, I make 2 points. One, addressing the last point. Hopefully, there's a son of Sam law in Idaho, or the prosecution has made that part of the agreement that he can't profit off of this. So if there is any documentaries or anything, any of that money that is made goes to the victim families. And then secondly, in terms of his defense putting on alternative people, it is not an ethical issue. His defense attorney has a duty to put a reasonable defense on. Now, obviously, if
law firm of James, Vernon and Weeks,
accusing people who
Coeur
didn't
d'Alene,
do it
Idaho.
or defaming people, well, then there's
I'm a victim's rights
that
attorney.
the defense is going to have to deal
For the
with.
past 2 years,
She
I've had the
to do
privilege.
Her job is to put a defense on for her client.
In this criminal case,